grand finale of the 1995 Intel World Chess Grand Prix. And the race for the overall title for 1995 was wide open. No fewer than 5 players could still win. The mercurial Vassily Ivanchuk, who won in Moscow. Viswanathan Anand, the Indian genius who defeated Kasparov earlier in the year in Moscow and was a semi-finalist in London. Michael Adams, who won in London and is finally fulfilling his great promise. Vladimir Kramnik, still only 20 years old, though he's already established himself in the world's elite. And of course, the freshly recrowned world champion, Garry Kasparov. But was he really in any condition to play in Paris? He admitted at the start of the tournament that he'd much rather be on a beach in the Caribbean. One by one, these 5 were whittled down to just 2. Michael Adams fell at the first hurdle when he was knocked out in the round of 16 by France's finest, Joël Lautier. Vassily Ivanchuk was edged out by Vladimir Kramnik, and Kasparov bumped out Anand in the semi-final, which set up the showdown between Kasparov and Kramnik, the big rivals from last year's Grand Prix. This was the 5th time they'd faced off against each other in these series, and each of their previous encounters had been classics. In Moscow 1994, in the first ever Intel Grand Prix event, Kramnik laid down the gauntlet to Kasparov by overwhelming him with a sensational sacrificial attack. The young Russian added insult to injury by demolishing Kasparov a couple of months later in New York, forcing him to admit afterwards that Kramnik was the finest speed player in the world. In Paris last year, Kasparov managed to salvage some honour by defeating Kramnik with just seconds on the clock. However, that didn't prevent Kramnik from becoming the overall Grand Prix champion for 1994. Their match in New York 1995 started where their encounters in 94 had left off. In another Blitz playoff, it was Kasparov who just held on to level his personal score with Kramnik at 2-all. So when these two fought their way through to the final in Paris, a capacity crowd at the Pierre Cardin Theatre just off the Champs-Élysées knew that they were in for a treat. The winner of this final match would be crowned the overall champion of the 1995 Intel World Chess Grand Prix and pick up a cool $80,000 for his efforts.
La première partie.
Hello and welcome to the finals of the 1995 Intel World Chess Grand Prix. I'm Maurice along with Grandmaster Danny King. In this, a classic matchup, Danny. Vladimir Kramnik against world champion Garry Kasparov, and you really couldn't hope for a better final.
Yeah, the whole of the Grand Prix is resting on this match. The winner of this match wins the entire 1995 Intel Grand Prix. So this stakes are high.
Well, with that Grand Prix, Danny, $50,000 in addition to the $30,000 check for winning the tournament.
Yeah, and these two have been rivals in the Grand Prix series, not only this year, but last year as well. Kramnik, the overall winner from 1994, so he could repeat his success by winning here. But also, they've had some tremendous tussles. The last match they played against each other was in New York, semi-finals, and Kasparov won by an absolute hair's breadth. It was such a close match. They always have tremendous fights.
Kasparov has never defeated Kramnik or convinced. Actually, he defeated him last year in Paris in the semifinals.
And that was so close.
And that was extremely close. He's never really defeated him, just outright crushed him. So far in the tournament, Kasparov has won every single one of his games. No draws at all. He's just been in command of all the games, showing his stuff, showing his form. Kramnik, a bit shaky in a couple of games against the young phenom Bacrot. He showed a little less of his normal strength and powerhouse intensity, but he's been playing well in the last few matches.
Okay, well, let's take a look at the opening. We have a slightly unusual system that Kasparov is playing. Instead of playing an open Sicilian, he's kept it close. He didn't play his pawn to d4 straight away. He played his bishop out instead. Kramnik has played his knight in to the e7 square. Well, he's now captured on d5. And we're actually getting a position, a pretty standard position, a rather strange move order to get to it, where white will probably get an isolated pawn on d4, but he has more space, more freedom to maneuver his pieces. In fact, this position, with colours reversed, is very similar indeed to the game that Kramnik played in the last match.
Yeah, against Lautier.
Against Lautier.
Against Lautier. And Kramnik, a true virtuoso against the isolated pawn. So that could occur if he now chooses to play pawn takes pawn and Kasparov responds with pawn takes. That would create the isolated pawn in the center of the board with its minuses and its pluses. And instead of doing that, he has just simply played bishop to e7.
In fact, if possible, if at all possible for black, it's better to keep the tension in the center. Instead of capturing the pawn in the center immediately, it's better to wait if possible, because then white doesn't have the c3 square available for the knight. Kasparov would like to move the knight on b1 out to the c3 square. At the moment, of course, it's blocked by that pawn. That's why Kramnik hasn't captured in the center yet.
So Kasparov with the jacket off already, Danny. In the last match against Anand, now playing c4 to attack the knight in the middle of the board, the jacket didn't come off at all. He had a very good position throughout and didn't need to seem to get more comfortable. But now he knows he's got to get in it with this guy because Kramnik does not mess around.
Well, an exchange of queens being offered here, slightly surprising. Kasparov just resolving the tension in the center very quickly. Certainly didn't have to do that. If I can just go back to the last match, Kasparov against Anand, they had this incredibly sharp piece sacrifice from Anand. And Kasparov played this move, bishop takes bishop, new move. He played a new move in the game, accepting the piece sacrifice. And he said that he'd had this on the board last night and couldn't find a win for white. The best that he could find was a draw, so he thought he may as well try. But I mean, I'm actually amazed that he had the courage to play something he'd only dreamt up last night.
Yeah, that is amazing. Anand, I spoke to him during a walk, and he said that it was a tough situation for him, and he had to make do with a sharp line. And what else could he do after the misunderstanding that occurred? And he played a sharp line, and it didn't work out, but it was really what he had to do because he had to win the game. Well, now it looks as if Kramnik has to capture the queen and was forced, and he's done so with the king, no longer worried about any sharp attacks against his king because queens have been removed from the board, so his king will probably end up on the c7 square, possibly even the e7 square. And now Kasparov is being pointed out by the French team with their illustration has a 3-2 majority on the left side of the board.
But I mean, this is not significant at the moment at all. And in fact, very often it's the 4-3 majority on the king side, which is more important. So I don't think we should read too much into that at all.
Well, the critical thing normally is the D file, isn't it? Who controls the D file in these positions? And yeah, it's a way off, as you mentioned, Danny, from anything like that being.
Now, normally, black's, there you go, it has ended up on e7. That's the safest square where it's in front of a pawn. It's very well protected indeed. So the fact that the black king is in the center shouldn't be a problem at all.
So now Kasparov, trained in thought. And it is so often that Kasparov gets absolutely nothing with the white pieces against Kramnik.
At first glance, this position looks completely equal. I don't see why black should have any problems at all. For instance, his king in the centre of the board looks very well placed to me. It's securely protected by pawn here on e6. And of course, you want to have your king in the centre of the board. It covers important squares on the d file, for instance. The only thing that white has going for him here is this majority of pawns, this 3-2 majority of pawns on the queen side. See, black just has 2 pawns there. But normally, this shouldn't be a decisive factor in white's favour. But it's It's amazing how Kasparov managed to build up pressure here. First of all, he played his rook to the d file, rook d1, and Kramnik responded by playing his rook to d8. Pretty normal stuff, just challenging rooks, and Kasparov exchanged immediately. Rook takes d8, knight takes d8. And now Kasparov played the pawn to a3. Well, with hindsight, I think Kramnik should have prevented the pawn advance, pawn to b4, by playing his pawn to a5. Now this is a slightly risky move because it weakens, for instance, the b5 square. But I think it's very important to try and hold up this advance pawn to b4. Instead of pawn to a5, he just continued developing with bishop d7. The pawn came forward to b4, and the bishop retreated to d6. Now Kasparov brought the bishop out to e3. Pawn came to h6. I think Kramnik was worried about a white knight coming to g5 and then possibly back into e4, attacking the bishop, which could be rather nasty. Kasparov played his rook to d1 on the open file, looking at the bishops here on d6 and d7. You never know, there might be some tactic against those bishops at some point. Kramnik responded by playing his rook to c8, but that rook does not look so effectively placed as the white rook, because it's just hitting the pawn on c4, which is securely protected by the bishop. Kasparov played the pawn to h3, just guarding against the knight coming to g4, so that's just restricting the possibilities of black's pieces. Now Kramnik was reduced to playing the bishop to e8, just trying to clear these bishops off the d-file. And Kasparov played the knight into d4. It looks very powerful indeed. Let's just compare the two positions. We can see that white's minor pieces, the bishops and knights, have a lot of freedom, a lot of possibilities. This white bishop, you never know, at some moment it might pop out to f3. Bishop on e3 looking good, and of course the knight's very well placed. Now compare these pieces with black's. This knight has no really good square to go to. The d5 square is covered by the pawn on c4. The bishop on d6, blocked in by the pawn on b4. And the knight on d8 and the bishop on e8 looking pretty miserable. It's these pawns on c4 and b4 that are so powerful, restricting the mobility of black's pieces. Kasparov has a clear advantage here, and it's not clear to me how Kramnik is going to unravel his position.
I mean, it would be lovely if he could bring his knight to c6 and bring his rook to d8. This is what he wants, to bring his rook over, and he's dropped his knight back to d7, so another piece ending up on the d line.
Okay, so the knight is covering that c5 square. That's very important because Kasparov can play something like knight e4 here, attacking the bishop on d6. I mean, this position looks ripe for some kind of tactic for white here.
And Kasparov is well aware of it. Kasparov, look, just staring down all sides of the board now, feeling that there are possibilities for him.
I mean, there are either knight d5 or knight f5 check. Let's...
Well, that's a sharp line, sacrificing a knight suddenly.
Knight d5 check.
The only thing about knight
Pawn
d5
takes.
is maybe he doesn't have to take. Maybe he can just retreat into f8.
That's true. I mean, I'm not sure if it's on anyway. Of course, the knight can be taken. Then knight f5 check. King up.
That would be quite dangerous, actually, to take. But yeah, maybe he can do it.
Very sharp indeed. But of course, after knight d5, you can play king f8.
Yeah, but in the meantime, Kasparov doesn't even need this kind of move. Kasparov, with such a big spatial advantage, he has a plethora of plans. He could do so many things. Knight to b3, knight to e4, c5. He can start thinking about c5, a bishop f3 on tap. I mean, he just has so many moves. And in the meantime, Kramnik's pieces just looking horrible in this little box back there. They are being squeezed, and Kasparov looking for the most precise way to continue. But in the meantime, Kramnik with 10-11 on his clock, and Kasparov ticking down now to 10-4-13 actually, before he's finally moved pawn to f4. Yet another idea preventing anything from going onto the e5 square.
Yeah, I mean, you can see Kasparov's line of pawns on the fourth rank, b4, c4, and f4. What they do is they cramp black's pieces. So you can see the bishop on d6 now has very little scope. The knight on on d7 is blocked, can't go to e5 or c5. So Kasparov basically turning the screw here. He's gradually squeezing Kramnik's position.
And Kramnik dropping back to c7. Denny, it takes a lot of guts to play the black position the way Kramnik is playing it. I mean, Garry Kasparov is shaking his head as if to say, what are you doing?
Well, he's shaking his head as if to say, well, there must be a tactic here. It looks as though a move like knight f5 check should win something. But knight f5, pawn takes knight d5, where you can check the black king round, but it's still not winning material, but it's so close.
No doubt about it. And Kasparov now just dropping his knight back to b3, not bothering with all the crazy ideas, because he has a big positional advantage, and there's no reason.
It's huge.
There's no reason to do anything fancy.
Yeah, and he now, because the bishop on c7 blocks the rook, he can now play bishop to f3, just looking at the b7 pawn as well.
The difference between the two forces is just huge.
Wow, this is a dream position for white.
No question about it. Garry Kasparov on great speed chess form. He has been fabulous, absolutely fabulous throughout this event. He did win all his games. Granted, he won one game by default against Anand, but he did win all the other games, no draws. He was not spotty. And now, you know, Danny, come to think of it, Kramnik had a very difficult match against Ivanchuk, managing finally to hold the Blitz game, but he had a very difficult match against Ivanchuk also, and now f6 being played. So Kramnik's road here has not been spotless and smooth, and he's also expressed concern that he may not be at the top of his game, and he has to be at tip-top form in order to defeat Garry Kasparov.
Okay, so that gives the black king a square on f7. So these mate chances that white have, not quite so dangerous now. And yeah, as is being pointed out, illustration there, Kramnik actually might be able to move a piece onto the third rank.
Can you believe
Shocking.
it? Can you believe
Breakout.
It is very much like a hedgehog position. Frequently, a hedgehog position occurs where one side has a spatial advantage, but it's very difficult to get in as long as the other side stands. It is like that hedgehog, isn't it? It's that crouch position.
Yeah.
Now, granted, the coordination of black pieces
not the same.
they don't resemble the typical hedgehog position. But if Kramnik can just sit tight, not create any more weaknesses than he has to, control this kind of squares he needs to control, just make sure he doesn't blunder anything, he could potentially get the opportunity to unravel his pieces. And it's easy for someone to overstep, particularly in a situation where your time is ticking down, and you see Garry Kasparov closing in on the 8-minute mark. So that kind of tension with a guy who's defending tenaciously, you know, if I were playing Kasparov, I would have done something crazy already, and Kasparov would be all over me. Kramnik, he's going to stay cool. I mean, look at this guy. Cool. Okay, you got an advantage. I know you do. I'm not done. But what are you going to do? I'm not going to give you anything obvious.
Yeah.
I'm going to make you work for this.
I mean, this is Vladimir Kramnik's great strength. He is so cool under pressure. But this one, if he gets out of this, well, I tell you, that guy is really strong if he manages to squeeze out. Because this is a horrible position for black.
Even if he gets killed, Danny, he's still really strong.
Yeah.
But I remember Judith Polgar made the statement. She said, you know, I lose all the time to this guy. She says, I feel like he will never fall for anything. And now Garry Kasparov playing c5. She says she feels like he's just so cool. She feels like she could never rattle him with any of her brilliant tactical ideas. Just every time she plays him, she just has a horrible score against him because he's so cool, just like, all right, you do this, you do that, don't worry, I'll figure something out.
Okay, so c5 has been played, expanding on the queen side. Now, I'm just wondering, this sets up lots of new possibilities for white. There's the little maneuver, knight back to d2, into c4, and then into the d6 square. That's one idea. Well, shock horror, Kramnik has brought a piece off the back rank. Knight has come to c6, cover some squares, and the bishop coming to f3 on this superb diagonal, looking at the b7 pawn. You can see just ring there in the telestration. So this is still extremely unpleasant.
It is unpleasant, but maybe, just maybe, Kramnik can get his knight off of d7, put it on b8, and then contest the d-line. Now he's going to go after the d-line right away and allow the shattering of his pawn structure with bishop takes c6. But this is the critical thing. We've been talking about that d-line the whole game, and if rooks are exchanged, Kramnik's problems will be greatly eased. It's not, by any means, it's not done. It's all of a sudden, it's all wonderful because the shattering of the structure could be significant. But Danny, I'd say that if he could exchange rooks, he'd be a happy guy.
Well, yeah, he'd be much happier than he is at the moment. This is disgusting, but yeah,
it's that critical d5.
That is a slight improvement to Black's position, no doubt about it. So Kramnik fighting hard, and let's look at the clock times. Kasparov is under 6.5 minutes. Kramnik around about 7.5 minutes. So this is not going to be easy for Kasparov.
Not at all.
Can he keep control? That's the question. He has an advantage, but he might be letting it slip. But now he's advancing on the right side, h4. But, I mean...
That's a strange
Well,
move.
okay, what he's trying to do is clamp down these pawns. He's preventing Kramnik moving forward with pawn to g5, which could actually be a little bit irritating positionally. But, you know, it's not that dynamic breakthrough that one would expect from this kind of position.
And the knight is going to be
looks at exchange. Well, Kramnik has got to be pleased with that.
Oh, yeah, no doubt about it. Exchanging rooks in this position is the kind of thing that Kramnik has been dreaming about.
And you saw Kasparov shaking his head there.
Yeah, that he
It's
just
as though, you know, he knows that perhaps he should have made more of this.
Yeah, that move c5, I have my doubts about it.
Yeah.
That c5 move just
With hindsight, it looks
all the
doesn't look so
fire
great.
out of White's possible advances. But
Oh, now he can start exchanging. Can he move his bishop out?
bishop out to c6, and that would relieve a lot of pressure. And suddenly, Kramnik is back in the fight. Vladimir Kramnik, a super strong player, and this guy is just so cool, and he just waited for his time. And now, with Kasparov making just a slip, it looks as if he's just back in the game. And now he's played a knight out, and Kasparov playing g3. Then these are not the kind of moves that we would
It's not the dynamic breakthrough,
be cheering about. And
the
bishop to f7.
Okay, so Kramnik is fighting his way out. Now the knight dropping back to d2, so he's looking to hop in to the c4 square, and from there it looks at b6 and d6.
Kramnik
so
has
he's not out of the woods yet. This is still very, very difficult for Kramnik, but his position has improved.
Kramnik has one final problem, I think, and once he solves this, then he's going to be okay. Is the problem of his knights, the way they're connected. The knight on d8 is a silly piece, and it sometimes I remember the phrase by Dvoretsky, the superfluous piece. H5 now attacking the bishop will have to move, but it's like this knight on d8 is an extra knight as they connect. If he could just exchange off a pair of knights, he'd be happy.
That's a great move. Bishop d3 stops White's knight coming in c4, and
bishop e2 and
now
more
we've got more
exchanges.
exchanges with this.
Things
are looking up for
much
for
brighter for Kramnik, much more close to a draw. This kind of play, and
Again,
Kramnik
still not easy because Kasparov has this enormous space advantage on both sides of the board, but Kramnik is edging his way closer. And he didn't
he's
exchange.
avoided the exchange.
Well, I find that really surprising.
Yeah, he must have seen something, and it's a shocking thing to see this exchange not being done, and Kasparov taking advantage of the moment to bring his knight up into c4 and looking at the weak squares. And now bishop to g8, and it gets just
Okay, bishop
stranger and
g8.
stranger.
I know, he wanted to play his pawn to e5, but now that's not possible because of knight d5 check. But some strange maneuvers going on with this bishop. I didn't see why he shouldn't just exchange it.
Yeah,
Relieve some
no
pressure.
question. His bishop going to that square now. Kasparov bringing his bishop to the f3 square, and that knight on d8 is still being tortured. It needs to do something. He's trying to figure out how to get into the game, and he's moved his king over to defend the knight on c6. And you just have to think that there's some strange tactics possible.
Okay, I think he wants to play his knight back to e7. and then maybe into f5.
And then the other knight could come to
after knight
c6.
e7, the other knight comes to c6, then maybe knight d5. Well,
that would be great.
Ease the pressure on his position.
No question about it. He solved that problem. That's the final piece to the puzzle. If he can get that knight over the d8 square.
Yeah, he's not there yet, but
yeah,
that's his idea.
But it's right now.
He's fighting hard.
Kasparov knows it. Kasparov senses that danger. Well, he knew it long before I knew it. He knows that maneuver is going to be critical to this position, and he's going to have to be ready for it. And now he's played king e2, as if he is waiting, and knight e7 has been played.
Okay, so Kramnik wants to bring the knight on d8 to c6, but this knight on e7 has interesting possibilities. He could come to f5, but also
or
to d5.
Oh, yes.
Blocking out the bishops.
This guy Kramnik is amazing the way he fights back.
Superbly.
I mean, tremendous fighter. He's done it time and time again. And Kasparov nervous now. King up to d3, and that knight on d8 could come to c6.
You know, you feel as though...
And it has finally left the d8 square, Danny.
You feel as though Kasparov should have been trying to find some dynamic breakthrough, but, you know, he's not there.
No, and now it's Kramnik with the breakthrough.
Well,
e5.
Well, he's going to seize the initiative here.
Boy, that just changed the whole complexion of the game. Now suddenly Kramnik's pieces are a picture of harmony.
There's a trick. If white captures on e5, then bishop takes knight check. Knight takes, the knight would have come in and fought king and rook.
And so now knight to
bishop.
b6 check has been played, trying to chase the king out of the position. But this is a totally new position.
But you don't need to capture this. So
you just move the king back.
Yeah,
he has moved the king.
And now there's a threat of the pawn takes pawn on f4.
The knight is going back into the d5 square, controlling the square. And that might be something progressive, that weakened d5 square.
Well, just a moment. Can I win a pawn? If I capture on d5,
he has
exactly.
taken.
You capture on d5, then I capture on f4. Can that be so bad for black?
He's captured again.
I just capture on
and
f4.
Rip, and suddenly
Kramnik's won a pawn.
It's Kramnik who's up a pawn.
He's given up the bishops, but
it's a pawn extra. Kramnik is up a pawn.
He ought to be able to hold this position. And look, even the pawns on the queen side might be weak.
Yeah.
Kramnik can play bishop down to c1, attack the pawn on a3.
Oh, man.
I think
Kramnik has turned the whole game around.
This is an extraordinary performance.
And he's played, Kasparov has pushed this king in.
And now
he's hesitating. He might have blundered a pawn.
Kasparov grabbed the pawn.
Well, there's no doubt he's touched the a pawn and he's shaking his head. He's got to move it. What is he thinking about?
He's got to move
and he's finally moved the pawn.
I think he offered a draw. Now, if knight did I thought he muttered something. Maybe
he did. He better have, because now he's in danger of losing this game.
Well, he's got 3.5 minutes left as well, and Kramnik 4.5 minutes.
Well, Kramnik could rip the pawn off the board. There's some indecision on Kramnik's part.
Knight takes pawn, then bishop takes.
And he has taken the pawn.
So what's going on here?
And now the king has moved up to c7. Kramnik, as far as bishop in the corner, it has been cornered, and now he's attacking.
Oh, this is very clever. So that now he can't move the bishop out. He must give the bishop away.
It's incredible. Bishop d5, f5 check could happen, Danny. Is that possible? F5 check,
bishop
and
d5,
maybe he might
f5 check, king up, e5,
bishop b2 check, king e6.
Well, at the very least, it can be exchanged off the board.
F5, there we are. Oh no, he can't play king e5 because of knight d3. He wins a bishop.
That's it.
Kasparov's about to lose a. What about king d4?
King d4.
King d4 is forced. What is he thinking about? He has to play king d4.
Okay, is there another trick? King d4, bishop b2 check, king c4. At the very least, Kramnik is going to hold this game because he can exchange off that bishop.
Well, Kasparov has to be happy, and he's just leaning back, shaking his head. I don't understand what's going on. Are we missing something obvious? What's happening?
He's taking it.
He's taking the pawn on f5. Why did he give away the piece? What was the matter? I'm totally stunned. What happened?
Well, Kasparov now a piece down. And he can lose this position.
Easily. And he's totally flustered now. Cannot believe what has happened, and he's in danger of losing.
Knight coming back. Well.
And king going in with
the
g6.
king. But there's no proper threat. King takes pawn, knight takes pawn check. Well, Kasparov is completely
he's just
lost.
Down a piece.
But I didn't understand it.
I'm stunned myself. And now he's played bishop e5 check. The king is going to c6.
Now knight takes pawn check. That's the end of the game.
Knight takes pawn check. Maybe.
No,
king g6.
King g6.
King g6 is possible. So Kasparov trying to fight, but now he's about to rip the pawn off.
Takes the pawn on c5, takes the pawn on a4.
Oh, he's totally dead lost. Oh my goodness, what a...
How Kramnik has got out of this. It's an extraordinary fight back. Brilliant play.
Incredible. And Kasparov just making moves now. And now he's about to lose his a pawn also, and he's just totally devastated. Look at him. showing it. He cannot believe what he's done.
Well, Kramnik must still be a little bit careful. He has to watch out for bishop g7 takes h6, but no, this must be lost. Let's just, I think he can play knight takes pawn, bishop g7, knight comes across. No, he should be able to take.
Well, then again, there's some remote. Oh, that's so remote, though. Can it be possible to hold this position? Kramnik stopping and thinking about the possibility.
He's got the time left.
Maybe Kasparov now getting a little bit more.
He's played the knight back to e6 instead to cover the g7 square. So it's still not over.
Kasparov now realizing that maybe he's got an opportunity to hold this game.
That's a clever move because now the knight prevents the bishop coming down to g7, but he's still got to grab the a-pawn.
Yeah, the a-pawn is going to go. What can he play now? He's got to bring his king back to attack the knight. It's the only move.
Then,
no, he's played bishop check. The king is going into c4. And now what is he to do?
F5. Is that the idea?
Well, king f5, it just looks like a check. And Kramnik has...
Kramnik's running short of...
No, Kasparov is down to 131. And Kramnik at 258. Kasparov sitting there now trying to compose himself, but shaking his head. And he knows this is a horrible position. Danny, I'm still confused as to why he couldn't play king d4. I'm sure there must have been something, or else he would have gone for it. There's no way he's just going to give up a piece. Could he have not seen this possibility? I mean, that'd be incredible.
Kasparov looks distraught. I mean,
what to do?
He's got to play it on.
He's got to make a move, king
He's
f5.
attacked the knight, so he's still got to target that pawn on h6, and this is not an easy position to win yet.
Knight f4, king to g4, now the king into b3, and that's going to be a pawn. He's played a5, still trying to defend.
He attacks the pawn with the king.
And now bishop to d8, controlling that pawn.
It's still not simple to win this position.
Knight back, and now bishop to b6.
Now, can he play bishop to d2?
Looks sensible.
That way.
He's played bishop to g5, king into f5, knight to... Oh, and now he's going after the pawn. And now
he wants to bring the knight back to take the pawn.
Oh,
that's a good move.
Wow, what a move. And the king into f5.
He can't take the bishop yet.
And king first going after the bishop.
That's it. That's a great move.
And now the pawn is gone.
The bishop must move away, and then he takes
what
the pawn. That must be the end. And Kasparov, 50 seconds.
What technique. And he knows it's over. And Kramnik holding himself together. And he's resigned. And there's a magnificent game. Kramnik was incredible. Defensive genius, but we still have to solve the mystery of king d4.
Hi, this is Grandmaster Damian Lemos. First of all, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you would like to receive more free chess videos from us, you can just click the subscribe button below. I would also highly recommend signing up for my free mail course, the 10 Grandmaster Secrets to Dominate Chess. During this exclusive course from onlinechesslessons.net, I'll share with you my own Grandmaster shortcuts to effective attacking, defending, and growth hacks to improving your chess without complicated books or memorization. So sign up by clicking the sidebar on the right, and I know you won't be disappointed. Once more, this is Damian for onlinechesslessons.net, and I'll see you in my videos. Thank you.